Let's get it. This is Life's Essential Ingredients with Jeff and a Mike, where we hope to inform, inspire, and transform lives, one essential ingredient at a time. Welcome to the show. Ashito, you know how we do it, baby. Every single time we come back, listeners. And I know this won't make sense to you, but we haven't recorded an episode in, I don't know, it feels like a couple months to me. We recorded a whole bunch. We got the shows already stacked up through January. And so we're back, and we are season 3, episode 32 with Edward Miskie, coming from New York City. And if you're new to the show, Life's Essential Ingredients, thanks for tuning in, first of all. But this show is actually part of a nonprofit, and the nonprofit's name is C4 Leaders. And we're the only nonprofit to utilize the pizza making process to create space for our companions to be seen, heard, and loved. We also write children's books, host this podcast, and use the most amazing handmade, hand-tossed sourdough pizza to bring out the best in each other. If you're interested in supporting the work we do, I would love you to check out. We have 2 sites, but the one I'll direct you to is pizzadays.org. So here we go. Season 3, episode 32. And the first place you can find our amazing guest is just at his website. And it's edwardmiskie.com. He's all over the place, but you can also find him on Instagram at Edward Miskie. So about our guest, Edward is an actor, author, producer, singer, songwriter, and someone yet to be defined. Edward is a sole survivor of a rare cancer and tells his life story in his book, Cancer, Musical Theater, and Other Chronic Illnesses. Edward's story is a fantasy, nonfiction, funny as cancer can be, musical theater, fever dream fueled by chemo, alcohol, sex, and heartbreak. Edward navigates his way through the painful realities of being a full-time cancer patient, indecencies, heartbreaks, wins, shenanigans, and more. Edward is a creative who is constantly finding new ways to express who he is and to bring humor, love, insight, passion, talent, and inspiration to all. Edward, thanks for sharing your many gifts and talents and for being our guest on Life's Essential Ingredients. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Hello.
That's how we do it, Pasho. We're just trying to sneak in that nice, kind of sexy hello, and we'll just let that lead us right into our thought of the day, which is just the best segue. And we've been doing this, Edward, for a while. I don't even know how many episodes we've recorded, but we're a good 130, 140. And this thought is something that just kind of ends up grounding us throughout the episode, and it's been something I've used my whole life in coaching and teaching. And so this is a pretty powerful quote that we picked after researching it. And it's from George Bernard Shaw. And I want to be thoroughly used up when I die. For the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch, which I've got held up for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it over to future generations. Why would I pick that quote for you?
Because I'm a crazy person that doesn't know how to stop. It's actually funny that you mentioned that quote, because I think I just read that the other day. And it kind of, I talk about this interview a lot, but there's this really great interview with Jamie Lee Curtis where she talks about having turned 60 and realized she had so much creativity left in her, and what a shame it would be for her to die having not gotten that creativity out. So I think that harkens back very much to that George Bernard Shaw quote, because it's basically saying the same thing. Like, why would I leave this earth having not drained myself of absolutely everything I was given? And I do think that on a subconscious level, that's just how I function. Like, if I get a bee in my bonnet about creating something or wanting to do something, like, I'll just do it. And I think that's why I think that's why a lot of people are confused by what it is that I actually do, because I'm just like, I feel like recording a couple songs and making an album. So let's learn how to do it and do it, and that's just kind of the way that I work and how this book came along. I just decided one day I'm writing this book, and I sat down at my job, at my desk, and on my spare time, I just wrote it. And I do think that it is the wringing out of myself as I get older and just kind of making sure that I have nothing left to offer by the time I'm out.
I love it. I love it. And I'm going to ask the most naive question. Totally go off. I have a few questions that I'm ready for you with, but how do you do that? When did that start? Because I think, and I'll just speak for myself and not even make it to a broader audience. I think a lot of people have a lot of good ideas and a lot of things that they want to do, but I'll use the word fear, and that could be not exactly in the right context, but I think we let fear kind of get in the way sometimes. And you definitely seem like someone who is burning bright and wants to continue to do that and burns brighter in getting these incredible ideas and then just taking action towards putting them out into reality. And again, my question would be, when did you know that you had that gift, and how did that come about? And then for you to keep going on and enhancing that skill set, so to say.
I mean, I think my first initial thought is that it was my parents. When you're able to do something like that, you don't know that you have it because you've never not had it. And so it's just the norm for me. But my parents certainly were helpful in giving me a strong foundation of sense of self. A lot of that had to do with where we grew up as well. I grew up in this very, very small town where, we knew everyone's names and everyone knew each other's business. And we, as children, like under 10, could like walk however long it was to the pool or to the library on our own. And it was totally safe. And so it gave us this sense of independence and capability from a very young age. And our parents encouraged us to do stuff like that, and by us, I mean my sisters and myself. And so we all just kind of grew up with this sense that we could do things. And it was, getting what we wanted was only an ask away. And I remember my mom can't believe that I remember this, but there used to be this art show at a nature preserve near our house. I think it might have been like 20 minutes away, and we'd go every year. It was called the Duck Show because all the artwork was ducks, and it was like painting and woodworking and all kinds of different mediums of artwork that centered around ducks. And they had a concession there, and I could not have been older than 4 at all. And I was walking around holding my mom's hand, and I saw that they had apple pie at this concession. And I like tugged on her hand. I was like, "Mom, I want a piece." And she's like, "Okay, ask for it." And I was so taken aback that like she wasn't gonna like walk up to the window and ask for this apple pie for me, and that I had to do it. And she gave me the money for it. And I went up to the window and I asked if I could have a piece of apple pie. And the woman, much to my delight, said yes. And I handed her the money and she gave it back to me. And I was like, oh, I just have to ask for things and I can get them. And obviously that is a very simplified version of how life works. But it was at that such a young age that my parents encouraged us to be proactive in seeking out what we wanted, that it kind of stuck with me throughout adulthood, for better or worse, where it's like, I want to do something. Okay, how do I get it done? And does that mean I have to ask someone for help? Does that mean I need to seek out knowledge of how the process or the crafting of doing this particular thing is done? But it's just the way I've always been, and I've never not been that way. So I don't really know if there was a moment where I was like, I know how to do this. It's just always been the way.
That is the way, Pasha, from the man.
It is the way.
I love it. There's like that's leading me to ask you another question, but I just don't know how to ask it. And it's not your expertise, and not that you're old by any means, but Mike and I are older than you and grew up in a different time. Obviously, you grew up in a little different time than we did, and now the time for young people is just so different. And I wrote down that you had just a strong sense of self that was instilled in you And I'm going to try and bring this around to a question, but they're more just kind of comments. Do you feel like technology right now allows the development of each person's sense of self more or less than back when maybe technology wasn't so ubiquitous, of just everybody's, on their device? And I'm not trying to say anything good or bad about technology, but I'm trying to link it in to the creativity that you have, and I don't know, just having the other thoughts that maybe got inspired of you having to go out and see, and you can do that same thing now through seeing all these cool videos and stuff. But yeah, do you think it's a little different now, easier, harder, better, worse? If you were to go back and, be 18 now with what's going on in the world versus when you were, do you think you would have been as creative, or do you think maybe you would have received some harsher criticisms that perhaps could have, made you play small? I mean, I'm kind of dancing around a little bit. I don't know exactly what I'm asking, but I think there's some.
No, I know. I kind of think I know what you're asking. And first of all, I think that despite whatever our age difference may be, I don't think that we grew up that differently. I think when we start talking about people growing up differently is when the internet became commonplace in the household, and we started to see technology in the household in a way that we hadn't before. Because up until that point, you and I probably both grew up with like a landline in the house. Our parents probably worked. We took the bus to school. We had textbooks. We had books. Maybe we had television that was like limited to what we were allowed to watch. But for the most part, we were involved in community activities. We were involved in school activities. We'd play outside. Our parents would be like, get outside, go play outside or whatever. And I think that is up until maybe the late 90s, early 2000s, the case, like we all kind of experienced growing up in that way, in the same way. It wasn't until the democratization of technology and devices came into the house where that started to change. Now, I, again, think that what you're asking, whether it's a developmental bonus or detriment to someone growing up with technology now, I think that is again dependent on how the parents kind of dole it out, how they use it, how the kids digest it, or how they're using it. The going back to 18 thing, like I moved to New York City originally to be a pop star, but one of the biggest problems I had was being able to find musicians and rehearsal spaces and getting everyone together to practice music. And I'd have to go rent studios to play piano. And if I would have access to technology in the same way I do now back then, it would have been so much easier for me to produce music the way that I can now on a computer screen in front of me. Back then, to me, that was so expensive and so foreign that it wasn't even a question of like, could I do this? No, of course I couldn't, because microphones were not hundreds of thousands, but there were thousands of dollars. Getting a keyboard attached to your laptop, attached to the right software with the right amount of bandwidth, like all of that was just money upon money upon money upon money. Whereas now, all of those things, you can get a really good microphone for under $100. You can get really good like producing technology for under $200. And all of those things are so easily accessible now that I think if shown how to use those tools in the way that a young person is expressing their want to use them, then of course it's going to be helpful. And I would say that it's almost a gateway to wanting to go back to a more analog way of doing things as well. I remember the first time that I heard Queen was not by Queen. It was a cover by somebody else. And then I went back and looked for the original. And my dad was like, oh, I have those vinyls. And then I would listen to the vinyls. And so to me, it's kind of the same thing where you have this digital technology where you can create all kinds of things. But at some point, you're going to be like, how did they used to do it? And then go back and learn, reverse engineer, reverse learn how to do it. So it could, for me, work in either direction. It just depends on the person who's using it. It's the same for driving a car. Someone can be really great at driving a car. They can be really shit at driving a car. You can drive it into a wall. You can drive it around the country. It just depends on who's operating it.
I love it. Great points. Great points. Hey, the show is called Life's Essential Ingredients, and you've lived a little bit. What are your essential ingredients that you need, in your life on the daily, and that perhaps a listener can listen to and say, I would love to incorporate some form of that and make it mine.
I mean, on the literal spectrum of ingredients, bread and cheese. I could live off of a charcuterie board until I am being eaten alive by gout. Just let me have it. Like, I just don't care.
So I'm gonna give him a second because listeners, I'm gonna give Edward one quick second. We were trying to change the times to this, and I was just down south doing some C4 work with my Pasho there and some other teams. And I sent Edward an email after the fact because we were busy. And I was telling him, hey, we're down in LA making pizza. And I forget what you said, but it's something really funny and all excited. And then to hear you say, hey, I'm just a bread and cheese guy, the literal.
Yeah, I was like, I want to hear the pizza story. What are you doing making pizza everywhere? I love it. I just had pizza the other night. It was unbelievable. It was this place in Jersey City. I don't remember what the place was called, but they had this pizza called shit face chicken, and it was basically like beer battered chicken on pizza, and it was unreal, so good.
That sounds good. Yeah, we love some pizza here, and our pizza is just homemade hand tossed sourdough, and just kind of simple ingredients, and so much fun to just bring the people together. Kind of like what you do with all your different talents. I don't know if that's a huge part of your inspiration, but just again, in researching you and seeing the humor, the ability to sing and write songs and write books. I mean, yeah, it's pretty, similar, but so different at the same time. But I think we're all seeking those same few ingredients that allows us just to feel like we're alive and feel like we're alive together, with other people.
Yeah, and nothing makes me feel more alive than a good charcuterie board.
All right.
Nothing.
All right. Well,
Edward, I gotta say, I agree with you. I love a good charcuterie board. Love it.
You can't go wrong if you have a good one. And so I think in the literal sense, those are my life ingredients. Like when I die, turn me into a charcuterie board.
Hey, so that's the problem, where we are. I'm about 20 minutes from Napa, 40 minutes from Sonoma. Tomorrow, actually, we're going to be out at a winery, Woodin Valley in Sassoon. And I'm sure there's going to be some charcuterie boards out there. But what kind of cheese are we talking about on your board?
There is a cheese by Kerrygold, I think, that is called a Dubliner. It's a kind of cheddar. It is so good. And one time I was in Roanoke, Virginia doing a show, and they had this tiny little, we call them bodegas in New York, but it was like the tiny little general store deli kind of thing. And they had this kind of cheese, but it was wrapped in a green wax wheel and aged in Guinness. And I was like, are you actually kidding me? And I would take this and I would melt it on everything. It didn't matter what I was eating. I was like, slice and on top. It could have been oatmeal. I would have done it. It was such a good cheese.
Man, wrapped in Guinness. That just sounds good. Pasha, let's get to you. What's your favorite cheese, Pashito?
Well, I'm not as extensive as Edward here, but I do like a good smoked Gouda.
Oh my God, apple smoked Gouda is one of my favorites. It's so good.
Agreed.
There we go.
Anything with a kick. Like, give me a cheese that has like some spice to it, or has some kind of like, I don't know, something unexpected. Throw it like I don't know. I think I had one time that was like caramelized bacon and onions in cheese, and it was like, okay, I could mainline this for the rest of my life.
All right, last thing on the boards, because you're getting me hungry, but are you going to mix in a little bit of a jalapeno on there? Can you spice up your crackers with a little jalapeno, get you jumping a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I love a good spice. I live right next to an Indian restaurant. It's one of my favorite places in the whole world. It's so good. So you give me the spice. I just recently there's a YouTube channel that someone introduced me to called Middle Eats, and they have all these different Middle Eastern recipes for different things. And the one thing that New York, in my mind, is famous for is our halal carts, like the different chicken and rice. And you can get like a hero at a cart for like $4 or $5, and it's like 8 pounds of food, and you're just like, ah, so good. And I wanted to learn how to make it. And so on this YouTube channel, it was like, okay, buy these 25 ingredients and dump them into a bowl and mix your chicken in. And I'll be damned, I did it. And it was 100% worth it.
Yeah, we got to move on because this pizza, chicken, charcuterie. Pasha probably hasn't even had lunch yet out here. But man, I don't even know where to start. You have so much to you. I guess let's just go down the alphabet here a little bit. Let's talk about your acting career, and maybe there's a listener that's tuning in and like, man, I would love to act and but doesn't really know how to get started, or maybe go back to that. They got that little voice in their head that's just telling them, you can't act. I mean, how did you get started? And then what couple of tips would you share for the listeners should they want to take action towards becoming an actor, actress?
I mean, brace yourself. That's the one. I started out as a kid, I was like singing in church and doing plays and like musical things in school, and I did it all the way up through school, started doing community stuff. And then, we came to New York for the first time when I was like 13 years old, and we saw our first Broadway show, which was 42nd Street. And it was kind of from that point that I was like, oh, this is like a viable career that people get paid to do. This isn't just like for funsies. And that's what I want to do. And it just kind of dragged me into it. And I've had a very, very up and down, hot and cold relationship with that as an industry my whole life. I mean, certainly you've heard stories of things that can go insurmountably wrong with people on the receiving end of the entertainment industry and versus those who are in charge. And I mean, I've had things on a much smaller scale happen to me in that regard as well. And I still like, we in a sense, we kind of gaslight ourselves to be like, oh, it's fine. Like, it's just, it's something I need to do to like grow my career. And like, it's totally not. And that's not real. But, back when I was young and beautiful. But I mean, for anybody starting out, I mean, looking back, I would just be like, there's so many things that I would change or do differently. Because I think I spent a lot of time riding the serotonin of like booking a show or booking a gig and being like, yay, I booked something. And so it became the goal to book something and not necessarily have a plan. And so I think going back, I would have more of an intentional plan of what I wanted and what I wanted to say yes to and what I wanted to go out for, so that it wasn't just like, oh, I'm booking things all over the country and on a big picture scale that looks great. But then when it comes down to it, it's like, but what else? And there was no real intention of like, this is where I'm going, and all of this other stuff is distraction. Now I feel like I have that now more than ever. But back then I didn't. I also would have spent money on some kind of publicist or something that would have helped me along the way in that sense as well.
Really good tips. Really good tips. What about singing now? And yeah, how'd you get into that? And is that just part when I'm going to sound real ignorant here, but when you're in the acting industry, is that just you try and become as talented as possible to allow yourself a little bit bigger access to perhaps different roles? I mean, it just seems like I'm in awe all the time of, you're watching, Jerry Seinfeld, and then all of a sudden, and I don't follow people's names and stuff, so I'm terrible. But then you'll see somebody else in a whole different role and they're singing and dancing, and it just seems like everybody's so talented and multi-talented, with everything that they can do. How does that happen?
Well, I mean, I think that's living in New York or living in LA, oftentimes we're spoiled in the sense that everyone around us is so capable of doing the job. And so then it becomes not about who is the most talented, because everyone around you is talented. And it then becomes about something else. And a lot of times that something else is out of your control entirely, which again is kind of the impetus for me saying that I would have had a publicist, because then understanding that everyone was kind of on a similar level, having that publicist or having a team to like put you in the right places really is what gives you the edge and the leg up of other people. Because so often artists and people in entertainment are very frugal with money, and they're afraid to spend it, and there's a lot of scarcity going on there. And again, looking back, it's like, if I would have spent that money on a publicist, the amount of work that might have come out of that would have been insurmountable, and would have proved that investment to be worth it. So I mean, I think I don't really know how to answer that, because everyone around me so often is just the most talented person I've ever met, and that is all day, every day. For me personally, like, I grew up singing. My parents were both musical. My grandmother introduced us to musicals when we were like barely able to talk. Mary Poppins, we watched that every day. And, my poor parents having to listen to that every single day must have been really tough. But it was just something that was in the house all the time, and we all loved. And my little sister sings. My older sister she has a doctorate in voice, and she's an opera singer. And I've traveled around the country performing and singing as well. So it's just kind of a family thing that just kind of happened. It wasn't ever something that I chased. It just was there.
What do you think the arts have done for you personally? Just what feeling do they give you inside yourself when you've sang a beautiful song, you've performed, and it's just you're just on cloud nine? And what does that feel like, for someone that's never been in that space before?
I mean, I think this question is so dependent on what pocket of my life we're focusing on, because there have been times where like it's just the best, and you feel powerful and unstoppable, and you just feel like the biggest person ever. You feel enormous in a good way. And then there are times where it just doesn't feel good, and it feels so yucky, and you just are like, I want to get out of here as soon as possible. And I have been in both of those situations and everywhere in between. And it really is, it's so dependent. And, because a lot of times, especially when you're doing theater, you're not necessarily in one place, you're bopping all over the place. And so like, if you get a contract, I just watched a TikTok, and I stitched this TikTok about this, of a woman who went out to Palm Springs to do a show, and it was a complete nightmare. I went out to Reno, Nevada, and I did a show out there for 5 months, and it was an absolute nightmare. But then, you get these gifts. I did a show in upstate New York with this wonderful theater and this great creative team, and one of the best directors I've ever had. And that was a joy to do every day. I got to do 42nd Street down in Virginia, and that also was just the greatest feeling. And there were times where it was scary, because I was in one of the leads, and there was a lot of words and a lot of in and out, and you don't leave the stage for like an hour at a time, and it's just a whole circus. And there were days that it felt really good, and there were days where it was like, I'm terrified, get me off the stage right now. And it just really depends. It's not a through line of like eternal bliss. Like, you have good days and bad days, just like you do with anything else.
And I'm going to just ask that one more question. When part of the thing I probably learned the most that I appreciate in making pizza. Now, my background was I've been a registered nurse for 29 years, and I have a few health challenges that now I just kind of do this podcast and make some pizza occasionally. But so life is a lot different for me, and I'm in a place where I can kind of be where my hands are, so to say. And to get lost in the process of making pizza and figuring out what does that mean, and so on and so forth. And you just describing that, yeah, one of the roles you had in Virginia was, a lead one, and on stage for an hour. How do you stay in the moment, and you got all these lines and you have all these other things going on that perhaps, could be applicable to anybody that's listening, that just has got a lot going on, and somehow being able to narrow their focus to really bring the best version of their current self to whatever it is that they're doing. What tips would you give that person?
Well, I think what we're talking about are two very different things. Being on stage for an hour in front of an audience of several hundred people is a very different kind of being present than if you need to be by yourself and find peace and need to center yourself. Those are two very different versions of being present. One, they both require a very serious amount of focus for sure. But like being on stage, especially if you're well rehearsed and depending on how long the run is and how long into the run you are, it's almost like having an out of body experience sometimes. Like there were definitely shows where I'm like going through the thing and I'm giving it all my all and I'm doing all the things, and I'm also running a grocery list in the back of my head for when I leave the theater, because I know that the grocery store closes 20 minutes after the show goes down. So I have to make sure that like I get off the stage, I take off my costume, I put everything in the laundry and hang up what I need to hang up, and I need to go out the door and I need to be out the door by this time to get to the and so like you're on stage thinking like, okay, well, I'm out of eggs and I need more milk and I have to get coffee. And it's so dependent on where you're at in the process, but that sometimes that happens. And so are you being present? Are you being the most present? Are you being the most focused? That depends on your take of being focused while you're on stage. But I guarantee you that if you've seen live theater, some of those people up there are doing that 100%. But being focused with yourself, where you need to like center yourself and kind of, like you said, get lost in what you're doing and be present where your hands are. I love that idea of like being where your hands are is such a great like illustration and like feeling of like being just here right now. I make bread. I love making bread. Back to the bread and cheese. And it's the same thing. Like you just put the flour in and all the other things, and you're just like like mixing it around and like getting it to the right consistency. And there's something about that, as you know, with making pizza dough, like it has this really nice way of blocking the rest of the world out. And I feel very similarly about writing. There's something, and I would equate the two in a very similar way, in the sense that it's the brain to eyes to hands back to eyes kind of circuit of like, I'm thinking about what I need to do. I'm doing it with my hands, and my brain is computing what I'm doing with my hands, and it becomes the circular activity or act that you need to like pay attention to in a way that nothing else that's going around you matters. It's this like, put your phone down and go get your hands dirty so you can't touch it. And then you can just have this moment with you and the flour and the yeast.
Exactly. And yeah, I'm loving the process. And you mentioned writing. Let's get into your book, because yeah, it's a big part of your story. Again, listeners, cancer, musical theater, and other chronic illnesses. First of all, how did it feel getting your artist proof in your hands, and like, man, I wrote this and here it is, and it's getting ready to get out to the world, so to say?
It was really daunting. It was really daunting because it made it real. It was like everything was like on a screen, behind a screen, in a cloud while I was writing it. And then once it was sent off to be proofed and printed and everything else, and I got it back, I just remember opening it and just looking at it. And I had this very, like, it was a pit in my stomach, but not in a bad way, of like, holy shit, I made this thing that is real, that is from my brain, that I am now holding. And again, it kind of goes back to that circular act of like, I almost want to say it's like plugging in an outlet and creating a circuit, an electrical circuit, because it is that brain to hands like almost to heart, because that's where it comes from, of holding this thing that's like now a physical manifestation of you. It's such a strange feeling, but it was a good one. It was, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, congrats on it again. So let's get into the book. I guess my first question would be, what was kind of, we've been talking about it, but life like, before you got diagnosed with your cancer, and then getting, I don't know if, I don't remember reading if you were 26 or that's when you were cured, but that number comes in my head. But kind of getting that diagnosis and kind of what you were thinking and feeling and processing at that time of your life.
Yeah, I was 25 when I was 24 when the tumor first showed up. I was 25 when I was diagnosed, and I was 26 when I was told I was good. Um, um, my life during that period of time, when it first showed up, I had just finished doing a production of Hairspray in Ohio. And I came home to my parents' house to like have a little bit of a week to decompress from all of that, because I was going to then the following week start rehearsal for another production of Hairspray that was going to be in Reno, Nevada. We were rehearsing in the city in New York for 3 weeks, and then we were going out there for like 15 weeks. And while I was laying out in the backyard, I got hot and I went inside and I took a shower. And while I was showering, I found this little lump under my arm. And I didn't know what to do. I asked my mom. She's like, oh, it just feels like a swollen lymph node. It'll probably go down. We didn't really think much of it. And then halfway through rehearsal, it was getting like visibly bigger. And so I went to my doctor. I was misdiagnosed. They put me on antibiotics and sent me on my way. And so, I mean, I was really just bopping around the country show to show while this was going on. And, out in Reno for however long we were out there, which is, I don't know if you've ever been to Reno, but don't. And just don't. And it just was getting bigger. So I'm in this like shithole like can of America with no real healthcare, I don't know anyone outside of the cast, and we're just kind of like doing the thing that you do when you're in a show, which is like wake up, go to the gym, eat, fuck off for a couple hours, show up at the theater, do the show, go to the bar, rinse, repeat. And by the time, and there was some drama in that show that I just don't care to even revisit. It was working with like kids who were like, I know I was only 25, but at that point I had been doing this for a while. And so like I was definitely like one of the older people there in a sense, and it was just horrific. But I left there and came back, and 2 weeks later I was in the hospital, and it kind of put a screeching halt onto everything that I had coming up. Like I was getting calls in the hospital for work that I had to turn down because I was dying. And of course I didn't tell them that, because God forbid you be the sick kid. So I was just kind of like, oh, I'm not available, I'm so sorry. And the assumption was that I was already working or I was already booked. And in a sense I was booked at the hospital.
Man. So obviously you had chemo and radiation.
Yeah, I was supposed to have, I think, 6 or 8 rounds of chemo. I only had 4 because they kept failing. So I'd have it and the tumor would shrink down, and then we would stop, and then it would grow back. And you could watch it grow back. It was so gross. Like it would grow so quickly that like I'd go to bed and it would be one size, and then I'd wake up and it would be another size. And so it was this really creepy, and it would turn colors. I have this picture of it where it's like this greeny purple kind of color. Looks like this third breast hanging out from under my arm. It was terrible. I called it my third boob all the time. And then finally what we ended up doing was moving over to radiation, which is effectively what we believe killed all the living cancer cells. But just to be sure, we decided to do a stem cell transplant. So I had to go through the collection process and the chemo, the prep chemo for that. And then I was inpatient for 21 days, mostly quarantined for a good chunk of that, waiting for my immune system to grow back, which was wild to say the least. I mean, numbers don't lie. They bring you these blood charts and you can just watch your blood counts just sink down and down and down and down until you're at utter zero. And that's when you're in the danger zone. And then, of course, once I was out, there's a 100-day period where you are still in the red zone of like, either this is going to come back, the transplant's going to fail. There's a number of things that can go wrong. And so for that 100 days, you're just kind of like on pins and needles. You look like shit. You feel like shit. You don't want to eat. You're like annoyed with everyone, and you're just tired all the time. Like my mom and I made a point to leave my apartment and walk around New York because it's such a walkable place. And at the time I was in the Upper West Side, and just if you went out of the building front door and you made a left and walked 3 blocks, you were in Riverside Park. There was this huge staircase that went down to the riverfront of the Hudson River. And along the riverfront were all these picnic benches. So the goal was we would leave, walk down there, and sit on a picnic bench together and just watch the runners go by. I was watching the runners go by. I don't know what my mom was doing. And lots of eye candy down there on the river. And wait until I was like not tired from walking that period of time and give myself a little time to rest, and then turn around. And going back up the stairs was like absolutely debilitating. Like I thought I wasn't going to make it. You'd like, it's like holding on the railing and like clawing your way up. And of course, like there's people around you like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? And it was tough, but we fought through it and we made it happen. And those were some really wild, that was a really wild like 3-month period of time. But at the end of that is when they told us that we were good. And then I could just kind of go about my life.
And what year was that? So how long have you been cancer free?
That was the end of 2012. So we just crossed the 11-year mark like 2 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Whew. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. And how has getting that diagnosis and going through, that life altering experience, how has that changed your life and who you are and how you view, each day now?
I mean, a number of ways, almost like, I guess in almost every way, in a sense, like pre-cancer me was kind of a dick. So, it knocked me down the pegs that I needed to be knocked down to like not be a horrible human to people. And like, I was right about everything and you couldn't tell me anything essentially, like typical 24-year-old, but like who was starring around shows around the country. So like, God help us all. I was Joan Collins. And, so that knocked me down a few pegs, and it really made me a lot more aware of it made me a lot more aware of what was being done for me, whether that was friends or family, and like the support that they were giving me along the way, not just in that hospital setting, not just as a patient, but like in general. I was able to kind of be like, oh, these people stick out, and these people are here for me, and these people are, because I mean, certain people weren't. I had friends not talk to me ever again. A guy break up with me while I was in the middle of chemo. So like all of these things kind of were the push pull of recalibrating who my people were. And that, I think, is something I think about every day for sure. But I don't think that there's this, maybe this is something I should incorporate into my life, but I don't think that there's a moment every day where I'm like, I'm alive and I'm grateful for every day, because certainly where we are in the world right now, I'm like, can I tap out? Like I'm ready. Take me now. But there are definitely moments where it's like, wow, somehow I'm still here.
So what's going on now? I don't know if this is the most up to date, but I was researching you and found out you're the creator and producer of Baratoned.
Yeah.
Is that still going on? And tell the listeners about that. It just sounds.
I wish it was. It was such a hoot while it was happening. It was me and my friend Dan. That was our we conceptualized the show together. Basically, it was three guys. I'm 6'4", and so like I found other men who were about my same size, and we'd slap on a suit and we would sing all of Broadway's leading ladies repertoire together. And we would do mashups and medleys of it, and it was choreographed, and like it just had it was such a romp. We had such a good time with it, and we toured that around the country a little bit too. And I miss it, but I'm so disenchanted with every single corner of the industry right now that I cannot do live performance right now. It's not sustainable. Like no one is going to pay me enough money to go do a show somewhere. Like I have my own apartment. I have a lot of shit I have to pay for. And your little like $500-$600 a week show is just not going to cut it.
Edward, if you ever do bring it back, Jeff is 6'9", and he sang in a choir once. So,
oh my God, stop.
Count him in for the next one.
We love it. We love a tall man. Listen, when I don't know if you found this in your research, but when I was in my stem cell transplant, and subsequently after the guy I was dating broke up with me, I started an online magazine for tall men. And part of it was because the guy that I was dating was 6'10". And I was like, how am I ever going to find another human that size ever? And I started this as kind of like a low key, this is how I'm going to find tall, handsome men. And then it ended up turning into this great lifestyle magazine where we talked about clothing and hotels that had like extended bed options, or like airlines that had better legroom than others. And like I had a travel blogger and I had a fitness blogger. There was this bodybuilder who was 7'2", and he talked about fitness for tall guys because obviously it's easier to pack on muscle when you're 5'2" than it is when you're 7'2". And so like this dichotomy of like what life is like navigating from a tall space. And it was so much fun. I did it for like 5 years. And then rolled it right into baritone, where I was surrounded by more tall men.
That sounds amazing. I would have loved to have read that. And Mike is trying to throw me out there. He's 6'7". So we were college roommates and played basketball at the University of San Francisco, which is where we met, and we've been best friends ever since.
I love that.
Yeah.
We love a tall king.
Oh yeah. So yeah, no, it's been fun. But one funny visual, since you're tall, and unfortunately I'm cheap, and so I fly Southwest when I can. But listeners like this, but try going to the bathroom when you're 6'8". Posh was telling me I'm 6'9", on a Southwest plane that it has like a rainbow at the top where you can't even get close to the toilet. So everybody else is like, what are you talking about? Well, just when you get to the bathroom next time you're on a Southwest plane, just add another, foot to your height and imagine, all right, how am I going to get my head close enough to be able to not hit it and go to the bathroom? Too much.
Well, not just that, but like it's the headroom, but then it's also the functionality of actually using the bathroom. There's only so far you can bend over until you are actually just peeing in your pants. And then trying to sit down to do it, there's a leg room issue. So like, I don't know what you want me to do. Am I peeing in the sink? Is that easier? I don't know. But like, there's definitely like a functionality problem here. Can we please start building planes that just have a skosh little extra headroom, please?
So you were a little bit more articulate with what I was saying, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. See, my Pasha was laughing because he doesn't like to fly. Maybe that's
how
just because he needs.
Well, it's traumatizing.
Like
how many times have I been on a plane where I'm walking down the center aisle to get to my seat and I'm like ducked down with my shoulders up to my ears, trying to keep paying attention to where I'm going. Like I just flew to London last year for the first time, and I was on British Airways. Of course, didn't spend the extra $7,000 to sit in first class. And so I was just jammed in the back with the rest of the commoners, and that was a uncomfortable flight. Just like knees dug into the seat in front of me, and like trying to like rear myself back, and like it just was bad. It was bad, terrible.
Yeah, no, I feel you. My youngest daughter lives in Spain, and so we've been going out to see her at least once a year, and I do not look forward to getting on the plane. That's about a 12-hour flight, and Yeah, I feel terrible.
Oh, that's right, because you're coming all the way from the other coast. At
Yeah.
least I only had 5-6 hours of
Oof.
airtime for that, but double that. Ooh,
Yeah. Yeah. But hey, just a couple
I
more
I would
questions.
take as many layovers as I could possibly get in that scenario.
Then you go and yeah, it's a mess. But hey, so it sounds like what are you doing now? I mean, it sounds like you're in a space where you're looking for something different. Are you already doing something different, or what's going on, as we speak right
I
now?
mean,
Career.
all of the above. So, I'm no longer pursuing theater in the same way that I have been. I was unceremoniously replaced on a national tour last year, and that kind of broke me a little bit in a way that I was not expecting. Which is why I flew to London, because I took a 3-week European vacation as a fuck you to these people. And that kind of really was, it put a bad taste in my mouth, but it was also very much like, this industry, there's a club to be successful in the way that you want to be successful in this industry, and you're not in it, and we don't want you here. And so that was kind of like me breaking away. But at that same time, that is when my book was published. And so like emotionally, I was all over the place, because I was like, yeah, your book is published, and also the industry you love, it doesn't want you here, but also you're going to Europe, but also your life is a mess. So like, with that being said, with the book being published last year, when I wrote the book, the entire purpose of writing this book in the first place was to make it a TV show. And when I wrote it, I tried to do it from the mind's eye of Rob Marshall, who was the director of Chicago the movie musical, Nine the movie musical. Basically, if it was a blockbuster musical movie, he directed it. And the idea was always to turn this into something else. Like, the book, great, love it, but it was the stepping stone to the next step, and the next step is TV. And so I have a producing team that I love, that I'm working with, and we are getting ready to put this together, all strike things being what they are, to turn this into a musical TV show.
Man, well, congratulations on that. That's exciting.
It's a bear of a project, but it's going to be star-studded and just absolutely wonderful, and I can't wait.
What a great segue. So we're gonna future cast, and it's 40 years ahead now, and your show had a 30-year run. The thing just took off and was just amazing. And you've gone on to direct and produce and do all kind of other incredible artistic, creative endeavors that have made a big difference in the lives of many, many people. And there's a quote that I love by John Alston: the only thing you take with you when you're gone is what you leave behind. And we'll say you're 86, 90 years old, and you're on your deathbed, and you're surrounded by the people that have been instrumental in your life, and you're getting ready to take your last breath. What is it that you want to leave in their hearts of what they felt through your presence?
I'll give you my real answer, but I feel like the idea of last words are so funny, or like last thoughts of anything. I'm only bringing this up because my best friend's father just died. He was 94. It was expected, but still sad and whatnot. And his last words, he woke up in the middle of the night and started yelling for his wife, who was right next to him. And she was like, "Why are you yelling?" And he's like, "I don't know." And she's like, "Well, just go back to sleep." And he says, "Okay, I'll shut up now." And then he never woke up. And those were his last words. And we were joking about that, and how funny it is, and that launched this whole other conversation of last words, and how they're never profound. It's always something really stupid or kind of inarticulate and nonsensical. But I think if I had to say anything, or I had to impress anything upon anyone, it would just be thank you. I think that's it. I don't think I need to attempt at waxing poetic with my 90-year-old, probably likely alcohol-ridden brain, trying to come up with something profound. I think I would just thank everyone, because likely, if they're still around me, they're the people who I already know now, or who have supported me in accomplishing what I've wanted to accomplish in this lifetime. And so I think the only thing to say is thank you.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Pashel, get us out, baby.
Wow, that was pretty good. But I would like to hear what your 90-year-old mind, hopefully with a few cocktails in it, would come up with at that last minute. That would be interesting.
Well, check back with me in like 55 years and we'll talk.
Edward, that has been a lot of fun. Thank you for being on the show. It's been a pleasure meeting you. And thanks again.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, listeners, again, edwardmiskie.com. Edward, Miskie.com. Best place to find him. Get out there and support the work that he's doing. We thank you for tuning in to another episode of Life's Essential Ingredients. Edward, thank you again. And listeners, boom, baby, that just happened. We out.